Recibamos con un fuerte aplauso al Dr. Mark Weiss.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días todos. And I think that would be the extent of my Spanish for today. It's a great pleasure to be back here in Panama, and I say, because I've returned, I was here in October. The U.S. State Department and the Organization of American States asked me to lead a session on sustainable cities at the Competitiveness Forum of the Americas, which was at the Westin Playa Bonita, very near Panama Pacifico. And it was there that I met Roberto Forte, and he was all excited, and he said, we'd like you to come back to speak at our international forum. And I said I would do it because I had a vision. And so this is, I think, maybe the most important thing that I'll say to all of you is that from being in Panama in October and for the conversations that we've had yesterday, I believe, as a international economic development expert, that the next dynamic economic growth engine for Panama, globally competitive, can be green construction and sustainable urban development. That you have the potential with the lead of this organization, and thank you to the Green Business Council and all of the sponsors for inviting me and for hosting this event. You have the potential to work together to create a whole new industry that will generate a lot of businesses and jobs and growing incomes. As we say in GUD, you're getting richer by becoming greener. That not only can be a model here, but also could become a magnet for international talent, international capital, and an export industry, because once you're doing it here, you're going to have a lot of people coming to study how you're doing it, and a lot of people wanting to hire your companies to tell them how to do it elsewhere. So if I encourage you to think seriously about following this vision. Let's see if I can, let me say a little bit about global urban development, or GUD. It's a huge international network. As we say, we have 600 leaders and experts in 60 countries. These are very, very senior people in business and government and academia and so forth, who came together around an idealistic vision and purpose, which is to help the world find the sustainable growth path in the 21st century, which is so vital for our children and grandchildren and our future prosperity and quality of life. So in GUD, we focus on three things: innovation and prosperity, sustainability, and inclusiveness. And in fact, we have, it's not just an idea, but we have a well-developed model, a framework that can be applied for economic development anywhere in the world, and has been applied in many places in the world, that we call Metropolitan Economic Strategy, Sustainable Innovation, and Inclusive Prosperity. And now I'm going to see if I do this. Oh, there we go. So, and this year, this is a map of the state of Rio Grande do Sul, which is in the south of Brazil. Porto Alegre is the capital city. And was mentioned, I'm now a business and economics professor, international professor there, and because under the national industrial policy in Brazil, the Minister of Development, Industry, and Trade, who very much likes the GUD economic development model, asked us to come into Brazil to work in one state to show how well this framework can work and then be applied in all the other states in Brazil. And this project, with the support of the Brazil's federal government, is funded by the World Bank. And I can tell you the centerpiece of the strategy is for Rio Grande do Sul to become the most sustainable and innovative place in Latin America by 2030. So since I'm a huge believer in competition, if Panama wants to compete for this goal and to win this title in the spirit of the World Cup, I encourage you to compete. But that's what we're doing in Rio Grande do Sul. If you want to know more about our framework, first of all, I really invite all of you, I'm going to have very little time to talk here, so please go to the Global Urban Development website, which is globalurban.org, and if you go to the publications page, there are many, many, many great publications, all of which you can download for free as PDF files. This is the first installment of our work in Rio Grande do Sul. This is a report we did in 2012, which is brief. It's only about 25 pages, and it's a very good example of how we apply our framework. And you can read it either in Portuguese or in English, but I apologize, not available in Spanish. But it is in Portuguese and English. This I encourage you to go. This is a U.S. publication put together by a lot of smart young people called Next City, and just you can see just on June 19th there was a piece about a talk I gave 10 days earlier, on June 9th, this is a selection of, it's a much longer article, for an area of Porto Alegre called the Cuarto Distrito, or the 4th District, which can become, has the potential to become a major center for sustainable innovation and creative economy in software, in technology, and media and graphics, and a whole bunch of other things. And so they asked me to talk about a very big development that I spearheaded in Washington, D.C. in the 1990s that was a huge success, called NOMA, which stands for North of Massachusetts Avenue. And so those of you who have been to Washington, it's right behind Union Station. And so I thought, well, it would be perfect to talk about NOMA here, although I apologize because it isn't just going to be about NOMA. I'll get to it. But in the speech I gave in Porto Alegre, I first gave the GUD framework briefly, and then talked about NOMA. But then, because on May 21st, I just had my 64th birthday, and I was kind of, as the Beatles would say, it blew my mind, because I can remember when I just turned 17 years old when I first heard the song When I'm 64 on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and I thought, I can't believe that I now am 64. And so instead of just giving, I teach a graduate course at Columbia University, a whole course on the GUD framework. So instead of just giving a mini version of the GUD framework, I expanded it, in this case, to actually look back over my life and how I developed this framework from the 1960s when it began to the 1990s when we applied it in Washington, D.C. So let me just step back, and I'm going to have to go quickly through the lead-in as I go along, and so please feel if you have either to ask questions during the question period later, or in the afternoon I'll be around to talk to people. I grew up in Chicago. I was born in 1950, and it was one of the fastest growing industrial cities in the world for the century leading up to when I was born. And Chicago was, when I grew up there, was a city of tough guys and hustlers, city of muscle, what Carl Sandburg, the famous poet, called the city of the big shoulders, and as you can see, I don't have big shoulders. So when I went to Stanford University in San Francisco Bay Area in 1968, and the idea that the future growth of an economy was knowledge and information based was a revelation, and turned out to be much more than we could have ever imagined. Say that the number one most important brain is the muscle. The most important muscle is the brain, the mind. So I was involved from the very beginning in this growth of the new economy in California, which has been, as you well know, a huge success in the 46 years since then. One thing we certainly didn't appreciate was communications intensive. This was, of course, before even fax machines were invented, let alone the internet. But if you look at today on smartphones and texting and social media, Facebook and Twitter, we're only seeing the beginning of how powerful technology communications aspect is. Urban and people-centered, this is a vital shift, especially we're seeing this in Brazil, where you have a resource-based economy, which much of the world was based on, where the things were valuable, but people not so much. And in the new economy, that flips completely around. The absolute single most important economic asset in the world is people, more than any other resource. And because you need a lot of people with a lot of skills, that means urban areas are the economic wave of the future. Resource efficient, another word for sustainability. And again, see this in Brazil, where you have abundance of resources. There's a lot of waste, because people say, well, no problem, there's always a lot more where that came from. But as we understand, as the world population, which was just a little over 2 billion when I was born, and it's now 7 billion, it'll be 9 billion by the middle of this century, resources become very finite and scarce. So it's absolutely vital, as we see from these two very impressive presentations earlier today, that we find ways not only to conserve resources, but much more importantly, in an advanced technology sense, to recycle and reuse resources in a circular economy approach. And that's what sustainability is all about. The one abundant resource that we have limitless is people, and we should use the talent and brains of all of them. And of course, globally oriented, which you know very well from Panama. Okay, so the Metropolitan Economic Strategy Framework, this is a piece I did for the Harvard Economics Review in 2006. The fundamental starting point of it is that urban areas are more economically productive. You can see here, this was a chart, the first time anybody put together, even though the World Bank had the data, we put this together, and you can see very clearly the two things. First, the richer a country is, the more urbanized it is, and vice versa. The more urbanized a country is, the richer it is. But more importantly, you can also see that the share of the national income that comes from the urban areas is always greater than the share of the population that's urbanized. And why is that? Because urban areas combine the two things that you need to compete successfully in the new economy in the 21st century. First, you need people with advanced skills. Now, it's possible to have people with advanced skills in a rural area, but you actually need a lot of people with a lot of different advanced skills interacting with each other. So by definition, if you have a lot of people, that's an urban area, and that's why you have this phenomenon of this incredible urbanization that's taking place now in the developing world. We saw about Sao Paulo earlier, was, Brazil is a country, when I was born, was 30% urbanized. Now it's heading on towards 90%. This is a list of what we identified after long research and many years, the key economic roles for cities and urban regions, only growing in importance. Now, so you can see I'm going fast. Now, this is the heart and soul of metropolitan economic strategy, and indeed of any economic strategy. So, and in the vision that I described for Panama is based on the assets that you have. So we have a saying: "Be yourself." So it's like a team. You're watching the World Cup. No team is strong in every area. So what you have to do is you identify what are your strengths, what makes your people special, what makes your place special, and invest in and build on and strengthen those assets. And as you do that, then you're generating the dynamic industry networks that will grow competitively based on the assets that you have. Now, what is an asset is not necessarily obvious. It can be, for example, I always tell the story, when Steve Jobs went back into Apple, the Wall Street said the three biggest liabilities of Apple were a closed operating system, small market share, and more expensive product. And then Steve Jobs said, those were the three, sorry if I misspoke, they said those were the three biggest liabilities. That's why Apple was going under. The three biggest liabilities were closed operating system, small market share, and more expensive product. And he said, actually, those are our three biggest assets. And the whole turnaround of Apple was based on that higher quality, special appeal. So it's very important for you to open your minds and to realize that what you may think of as a liability actually can be an asset. And when you'll see when you get into NOMA, the story, which I'm going to have to go fast to get to, absolutely everything we said about NOMA that was an asset, everybody else saw was a liability. So now they would say it's an asset, but that's because of the success. Okay, so again, people are the most important economic asset at all, and the fundamental things about economic growth are the fundamental things about life and what makes life work and quality of life. Transportation and infrastructure, which is a huge challenge here. Education and workforce development, another huge challenge here. Research and technology, but also other things you don't think of as economically related, like health and safety, like culture and amenities and environment, and I'm going to talk about particularly on environment. There are two types of motivation for an economic strategy, metropolitan economic strategy to work. One is the crisis model, where people have their backs to the wall, like Singapore did in the 1960s or Barcelona in the 1970s, and you need great leadership to break through in a moment of crisis and pull people together to succeed. This was the situation in Washington, D.C. Now, you can also have an opportunity model where a place is doing pretty well, but has a vision to do much greater. Like Shanghai wants to supplant Hong Kong as the top financial center in Asia. They don't need to do that, but they want to. Austin, Texas was a place that was already doing fine and became a high-tech center because they really wanted to. I think in the case of Panama, you're more in the opportunity mode. I don't see that you being in a crisis, but you can have a vision to be much greater as an opportunity. Okay, so I'm going to go really quickly now in the lead-up as I watch the time. But so in this period, as I went through this evolution, I got involved in California in urban politics, and learned some very important lessons there. For example, in San Francisco, you know Jane Jacobs became famous by helping to stop the urban renewal that would have destroyed Greenwich Village in New York, and we did the same thing in San Francisco in what's called the South of Market area, which now today is where Twitter is and all that stuff. So if we had not been able to protect it and preserve it then, it wouldn't be thriving now, which is another important point about economic development. New is not always better than old, and more is not always better than less. I then got involved in state and local economic development, helped put together for a young, dynamic governor of California named Jerry Brown, who's now an old conservative governor of California, but still with the same vision he had then, a major initiative for the public employee pension funds, PERS and STIRS, to invest in innovation and economic development in the state, in renewable energy, in community development, and so forth. Also then worked on national urban policy at that time as a grad student at University of California, Berkeley, which in how to tie urban and regional economic development into national policy, which is part of what metropolitan economic strategy became. But the main thing that led to was 1981, I was appointed as the deputy director of the first high-technology economic development initiative in the U.S., the Commission on Industrial Innovation, created by Governor Jerry Brown and co-chaired by David Packard, the co-founder of HP, and by Steve Jobs, who, like me, was a young guy with a beard. And we learned many, many, many important lessons from this, and it became a very vital part of my career to this day. Innovation-led economic growth. At that time also, we pioneered the first sustainable economic development strategy in America for the city of Berkeley, California, where the University of California campus is located, where the centerpiece of the economic growth was focusing on energy efficiency and renewable energy, and to this day, Berkeley is very well known for that. And this is where this is the other part of the model of sustainability. as we said back in the 1970s when it was a totally radical idea, good environment is good economics. This is vital, as you now, all of you here understand, but you have to win over your partners and your colleagues and your friends and neighbors, that the future of economic growth in the 21st century is to become more sustainable, not less. And there are three reasons we discovered in California in the 1970s why it worked. First of all, Silicon Valley and the San Francisco Bay Area. Why did it succeed there? One piece had to do with the education system, Stanford and Berkeley. One piece had to do with a huge amount of military spending, and by the way, there was a counterculture change where we said that, the technology was there, but it was to have nuclear war and Vietnam War and to blow up and kill people. We very much supported the space exploration, but we said, research life, not death. Why not have technology to protect and improve the environment rather than to blow it up? To make people healthier rather than to kill them, to educate people, to enable them to communicate better. And it was this cultural shift that actually enabled the new economy to succeed. I want to highlight that point, that economic development is about human values and not necessarily just about technology. So the first thing that we realize is that if you look at Silicon Valley and the broader area, the other third reason why it succeeded was because it was a really nice, beautiful place. And all these talented people are mobile. And so they like to, live and work in really nice places. As we can see, like what the Panama Pacifico is working on, what they're working on in Sao Paulo, a magnet to attract and retain this kind of talent is vital for global competitiveness. So if the people said, well, we don't care about the environment, let's ruin it, in the name of the economy. If they had done that then, Silicon Valley wouldn't be there now. They would have moved somewhere else. So the first thing, this is a great quote from a Nobel Prize economist, the first thing we realized is quality of life, enhancing, preserving the environment is vital for economic growth. The second thing that we realized was green innovation. In other words, that in the process of figuring out how to become more sustainable, you're creating whole new technologies, which themselves generate vast amount of business growth, and which is a big part of California economy today. And thirdly, resource efficiency. And this is one of my favorites that, California in the 1970s, the per capita energy consumption was about the same as the national average. Today, it's 40% below. How do we do it? By having higher standards, which I recommend here, for energy efficiency in all new buildings, in all new motor vehicles, in all new electrical appliances and equipment. May be harder for you to do the latter two because California was a big market, so manufacturers, if they wanted to sell a lot of stuff, they had to comply. But you can certainly do it with buildings. And over time, what did that lead to? $56 billion just up to 2006, so it's way more now. $56 billion that businesses, households, and state and local governments saved in California, consuming the same cars, the same buildings, the same stuff, refrigerators, you name it, but using less energy. And that's like a giant pay increase for people. It's like a huge improvement of the bottom line for businesses. And that money got, instead of going off to, buy the oil from the Middle East, was reinvested in the state, which created 1.5 million jobs at a $50 billion payroll. So this is a book I highly recommend. It's like the Bible for me. This man, Ray Anderson, he was the co-chair of the President's Council on Sustainable Development, on which I served, who had a company, an industrial carpet company that was not green at all. And he, out of his heart, reinvented that company to be, they saved $450 million. They followed this Swedish method called the natural step. They created more eco-friendly carpeting. It's like this kind of stuff. That's what they manufactured. They attracted much more talented workforce because it was a green company. Read this book. Everything they did to become more sustainable made them a much more profitable company, and that's every company can follow this model. As we say, some companies are engaged specifically in the business of producing things that improve the environment. So those are clean tech businesses. But every company, as Ray Anderson proved, can be a green business, can be more resource efficient, sustainable in how it operates. And this is the model that grew out of this period in the 1970s and 80s, getting richer by becoming greener, what we call the four greens: green savings, that's a starting point, saves you money; green opportunities, creates business and job income growth; green talent, investing in people that have the skills like you have in this room through sustainability; and green places, making places greener. So it evolved from there, where I worked on the community level to try and connect communities to new technology. I also did a book on, which I commend to you, that is in Columbia University. I ran the Real Estate Development Research Center, and we did two things. First, this book, The Rise of Community Builders, which is very important because it showed in America, and it would be the same here, how there was a group of real estate developers, large-scale and visionary, like people here in this room, that actually led the way in working with the public sector and bringing the public sector into having a much more advanced system of urban planning and development for a higher quality development. And then I did this textbook for the Urban Land Institute, which is an organization of developers that represents these kinds of people. That's now the best-selling English language university real estate textbook in the world. Finally, we got to where we did Metropolitan Economic Strategy as a national policy initiative in the Clinton administration. That was 2 years in the making, involved many federal agencies, the President's Council on Sustainable Development. This was a report that we did in October of 1996. We also focused on, because at that time the fear was that the cities were going to be abandoned, and so we had a big piece of the strategy was showing that in every region, and in looking at industry clusters or industry networks, the central city has a vital role to play, especially in things, in higher education, business services, and so forth. So that was a key part of this strategy as well. Then Andrew Cuomo became the Secretary of HUD. He's now the governor of New York, and actually he has a version of Metropolitan Economic Strategy for the state of New York. If you look, they have ads now, and they say we have 10 regional strategies. I would see them on TV all the time on MSNBC. So then we did a pilot version for Baltimore metropolitan region that was successful. We did a state-level version for the National Governors Association, how to apply this at the state level, and this is exactly the model we're using in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. We had a national conference to set it up for the administration of President Gore, which didn't happen. But I wanted to really, beyond Baltimore, do something that would really prove how well this works. So I got my chance in August of 1997. Andrew Cuomo asked me to, the Congress, the DC government was in big financial trouble. It was being run by the federal government through what was called a control board. The Congress passed a law mandating that the city have a private sector-oriented economic strategy, and I was brought in to coordinate that effort, which was a major success to this day. Washington, D.C. at that time, all the trends were going down. In 1997, by 1998, they were all going this way, and they've been going up ever since. They just had a mayoral election, and all the candidates ran on they're still doing this plan. So there's a three-part framework: strategic industries, the key industry networks and all the other businesses; strategic populations, both the people as a workforce and people as residents; and strategic areas, and it's vital for you to put all these things together: business, people, and place. These were the key networks that we identified were the growth engines, and they were, people said, how can you do Metropolitan Economic Strategy and do a plan for a city? We said, because the key industry networks of the city are all the same ones that are key for the region. So we said we want to grow the region and have the city capture a larger share of the growing pie. I'm not going to go through these, but I teach a whole course on this. These were the principles that we followed in doing this plan, and so I'll give you a chance to read them over. But you can see how innovation, sustainability, inclusiveness run through this whole approach. Okay, so now I'm going to get into NOMA. The first thing that we did was we had, even though the city was almost bankrupt, it was also so poorly run that there was a lot of federal money that they hadn't spent. So my first job was like Santa Claus, was find a way to spend the $73 million as fast as you can. So we organized the low and moderate income communities, which is what the money was eligible for, into 8 citywide task forces, and focused on strategic investments, on leveraging. So this money that we had became more than $300 million investment. You can see what it produced. And in this process, and this was vital for NOMA, in the 8 task forces, not only did I coordinate the whole thing, but I made myself the chair of one of them, the New York Avenue Task Force. And so we created a very strong, trusting relationship with the community. And keep in mind, of that $300 million, probably 30, 40, 50 million of that was invested in this area, in the surrounding broader area where NOMA was located. So in the 1998 plan, there were 40 key actions. We had thousands of people involved. We had a 30-person steering committee. We had a strategy, and we picked 40 key actions to forward the strategy, and 2 of them directly related to NOMA. Develop NOMA as a technology, media, housing, and arts district, and build a metro station at New York Avenue to spur development. So now you can see where it's located. The original NOMA was actually twice as big as this in 1998, but the area to the west, or in this case to the left, and ended up being renamed, now it's called Mount Vernon Square. So if you look at all the numbers of the success of NOMA, actually it was more than double that. But now here's the thing about the fundamental assets. This was a completely abandoned area that people said was just hopeless. It was rail yards, it was vacant land, it was abandoned industrial warehouse buildings, and those were the disadvantages. We said, no, those are the advantages. So first of all, Federal Express had their regional distribution center there. It was very centrally well located. It had the rail infrastructure. It had, because the rail infrastructure had broadband fiber optic cable, which was one of the only places in the city where you had it. It had these large development sites, kind of like the ones that you saw earlier today. It had the industrial loft-style buildings, which people wanted to demolish. And we said, no, already you had Soho and Tribeca in New York, and so these were the huge assets having these buildings. So not only would we not encourage or let people demolish them, we wouldn't even let them demolish it. This is a Heck warehouse that's now finally going to become a mixed-use development. Okay, so here's the, you can see the heart of the strategy was to build a new metro station, and it had never been done before, in the sense that no place in the world had ever done an infill station between 2 stations while the trains were still running. Now keep in mind, this was above grade, it wasn't underground. And so it was a big challenge, and that's why it cost a lot. But it was vital to establish the place as transit-oriented development, and also it had this other advantage that the federal government only leases office space in buildings that are within 2,500 feet of a metro station. So as soon as we could get the metro station, all of that land became much more valuable. So here's a rendering of what it looks like today. Now this is the thing that was outside the box. The Transit Authority doesn't have the money to build projects, so the local jurisdictions pay for that, and they operate them. The DC government didn't have the money. The federal government was very mad at the DC government and doesn't normally pay for this kind of thing. So people said it was impossible. And I went to the private sector because there were a bunch of big developers that owned all this land. And I said to them, we want you to pay for pay a significant chunk of the station. Originally it was $25 million, and they said, you're crazy. Why should we do it? You build the station, and then we build our buildings, and then our taxes go up, and that's how we contribute. I said, that's how it normally works. So it took me a year. We met every month. They said, no, 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 until finally, after the 10th month, one guy said yes, and the 11th month, another guy said yes, and on the 12th month, they all agreed. Because I said to them, the choice is not having the station whether you pay for it or don't pay for it. Because if that were true, then don't pay for it. The choice is either you help pay for the station and there'll be a station, and you'll make a lot of money, which they agreed they would, or you don't help pay for the station and there won't be a station and you make nothing. So they could come to you today and tell you it was one of the smartest investments they ever made. And once we had the private sector, then we were able to get the DC government, the federal government to come along, because who could walk away from a deal like that? So that's how we did it. Also, how did we get the federal money? Because the federal government really was very mad at the city. But there was this agency called ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They had $100 million to build a new headquarters, and the Secretary of Treasury wouldn't let them move to the suburbs. He said, you have to find a site in the city. So we went to them. We said, we have a great deal for you. The city owned a site that was used for a truck yard, which we could move. We said, we'll sell you the site if you build the headquarters here on the condition that you go to the Congress, because the Congress liked ATF, particularly Republicans, and get federal money to build the station, because they had to be near a station. So if they couldn't get the federal money to build the station, they couldn't build their headquarters there. And so that succeeded. This is when it was under construction. Now, we did a lot, and I want to emphasize, somebody asked me about inclusiveness. You know, the area was abandoned, but it was surrounded by low and moderate income African-American neighborhoods, which I knew very well from doing the DC plan. So we worked very actively to have, we said, either everybody wins or nobody does. The environmental community, the low-income community, everybody won on this. And you can see here's a list of many different things we did to make sure that the surrounding community benefited. You know, we kept, and when Metro had the environmental impact hearing, usually people come and testify against every new infrastructure project. We did so much work with the community that there were 35 witnesses in favor and nobody opposed. Never happened before or since. Okay, so the media strategy was important. I mentioned XM. Here's National Public Radio. CNN is there and so forth. We also had a technology strategy, but there we had bad luck. So, you know, things change in economic development. So we attracted in the early days Teleglobe, Global Crossing, Enron Broadband, MCI Broadband, Level 3, and so forth. Many of these companies then had trouble and pulled out, even after they'd made major investments. But by that point, things were working so well that that space got taken by other users. Now you see the fundamental assets today, including, and so the identity became that it was a really green place, and that was the attraction, including a lot of green buildings, LEED buildings. But transit-oriented, connected. You can see here, I don't know if I can read this, when they did the survey of the people, what is its greatest strength? Transit accessibility, proximity employment, emphasis on green development. We created the NOMA Business Improvement District to help manage it long-term, and you can see this was a few years ago, already 20 buildings. And now let's play the first video. So you can picture a place that people said, the people said was impossible to succeed when we started, and look what it became. This, go ahead, can you play it? That's the ATF. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to go through this quick. I just want to make a couple of more quick points. First of all, about branding. Why do we call it NOMA, north of Massachusetts Avenue? Because the hip places, thanks to Soho, south of Houston, Tribeca, Triangle below Canal, has become this image in America. Soma, south of Market, Sobe, South Beach, Lodo, downtown. So by calling it NOMA, that established a certain image. But in the end, the most important thing was the green image. And what's so interesting is in 1998, I coined the term NOMA, and everybody laughed. I said, this area, we're going to call it NOMA. And now, today, in 2012, the metro station, the New York Avenue Metro Station, they changed the name of the station. It's now called the NOMA Station. And so that the identity of the place became really vital. You can see, became the hottest, fastest growing real estate market in the city. So you can see Harris Teeter, when we started, they had McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's, and it was even dangerous to go there to buy anything. Now you can go to Harris Teeter and get sushi, which is a very upscale department store. So you can see the vista of all these new lead buildings around the station leading up to where the XM radio is. Another view of it. So there you can see these numbers. And now, please play the other video, then we'll wrap up. This is a more recent one, next in NOMA. Can you go ahead and play that? Okay, here we go. Do you have the sound? Okay, thank you very much.